The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. We have also just launched our brand new LinkedIn page. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn at Campaign for GLR. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays to tag us to tweet anything you learned from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Sarah Torian, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce today's conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we'd love for you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the Zoom screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to post any questions that you may have during the conversation in the Q&A box. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording, as well as all resources shared during the presentation and in the chat, will be shared in a follow-up email to all who registered. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during the closing and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Lastly, before we begin, I would like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Next week, we will continue our exploration of smart investments that provide long-term returns with a session exploring the importance of prioritizing relationships and early relational health as a part of tutoring programs. The next week, we will kick off the month of June exploring the impact of health determinants on early school success and the health barriers that can impede efforts around equitable learning recovery during and after the pandemic. The following week, we will have an exciting double header beginning with a Crucible of Practice salon focused on opportunities to embed learning opportunities in the everyday places that children and families go in the 12:30 p.m. Eastern time slot, followed by a session lifting up strategies for stabilizing the early learning workforce starting at 3 p.m. Eastern. Registration and more information for these sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope you can join us. Joining you now is Hattie Miles-Polka, a consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome to everyone joining us today. And thank you for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, Elevating Educators Investing in Teacher Professional Development for Long-Term Payoff. Professional development for educators has long had the aim of ensuring that teachers have both the opportunity and resources to continue their own pedagogic training and education. That said, not all PD opportunities serve the current and ever-changing needs of educators. However, there are organizations creating and offering worthwhile and effective options. We're lucky to have with us today speakers from the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards, the AIM Institute of Learning and Research, and the Hill Learning Center. All of these organizations have adapted, perhaps updated, or developed research-backed PD certifications and courses, especially in the last few years, that bring together the science of learning, the importance of communities of practice, and ongoing support for teachers. While each organization has a unique set of offerings, they share the goal of helping teachers, schools, districts, and states make worthwhile choices and investments in teacher education. These smart investments ultimately lead to better and longer lasting student success. As an educator myself, I'm particularly excited about today's conversation, which is sure to be both informative and inspiring. Joining us today as our moderator is Dr. Lisa Roy, the newly appointed Executive Director for the Colorado Department of Early Childhood. She previously served as the Director of Program Development for the Buffett Early Childhood Institute and as the Executive Director of Early Childhood Education for Denver Public Schools. She has volunteered and worked in nonprofit and government sectors supporting families with young children for over 30 years. Lisa, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Hattie, and welcome everyone. I'm honored to welcome you to today's panel of leaders in this work. And I'll briefly introduce each leader and remind everyone to please access the bios that are linked in the chat. So first we have Michelle Accardi, and she's with the National Board Certified Teacher Exceptional Needs Specialist, and she's the Director of Policy and Advocacy for the National Board. And prior to joining, she was an elementary school teacher in Albuquerque Public Schools. Welcome, Michelle. Next, we have Sarah Brown Wessling, and she is the 2010 National Teacher of the Year and a 23-year veteran of the high school English classroom and a former teacher laureate for the Teaching Channel. We're very excited to have Sarah and her perspective. Welcome, Sarah. And then we have Cynthia, known as Cindy Hadicke, and she's the Director of Client Success and Implementation at the AIM Institute for Learning and Research, where she assists with the successful implementation of pathway programs in various ways. She also coaches communities of practice sessions. We'd like to welcome Cindy. And then we have Sharon Hopper, and she's the Director of Literacy Professional Learning at Hill Learning Center in Durham, North Carolina. And prior to joining that team, Sharon served as the District Literacy Specialist, where she coached teachers and developed elementary ELA curriculum materials for Durham Public Schools. Welcome. I'm going to have Sharon kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. I want to tell you a little bit about Hill Learning Center and what we have to offer here in Durham. We're a multi-layered educational nonprofit. We do have a school. It's a half-day school for students with dyslexia or ADHD or other learning challenges. We have tutoring programs and then summer learning programs as well. And then the division that I work with is a professional learning division. So one of the goals of Hill is to increase access to high quality professional learning. And that's the team that I work with. We have developed some online courses throughout this pandemic and have learned a lot, as everyone else has as well. We have offerings in the science of reading, executive function, and literacy interventions. One of the new features that we were able to partner with some fantastic colleagues from across the country, the Reading League, Barksdale Reading Institute, Top 10 Tools with Deb Glazer, and the Right to Read Project. We all partnered together a couple of summers ago and created a teacher training called the Science of Reading short course for Teach for America candidates. And as a response to that training, people enjoyed it. We began to offer that more. And so that's one of the offerings that we have at Hill now. We maintain it, and then we have that as an online offering, and then can follow up with any kind of personal facilitation that people would like to engage with us around. We can facilitate conversations. And then we also have a reading intervention program that is the one that our teachers use at the Hill School. It is an MSLEC and IDA accredited training program. So teachers who would like to experience a full practicum can work with us now via Zoom, which is fantastic. So we can work with people. They don't have to come to Durham, although we'd love to have you anytime. But we can work with teachers, mentor, and coach all across the country and introduce you to the Hill methodology and the shoulder-to-shoulder coaching that we used to come to your classroom to do, we can now do online, and really support teachers as they begin to learn about the science of reading and implementing a structured literacy-based program. So we do a blend of asynchronous and synchronous trainings at Hill. And I think that kind of summarizes a lot of what we do. We do have a catalog that just features some of the kinds of professional learning that we do. We are a very small organization. So as you look, you can know that we always try to customize because we're small enough that we can tailor to the needs of the people that we're engaging with. So, thanks for having me today.
Great. Thank you so much, Sharon. And now I'd like to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And if it's all right, I'm going to have my colleague, Michelle Accardi, who's also on the call, go ahead and show her beautiful face. We're kind of a tag team today. And so I want to make sure that, we're able together to talk about the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, which is what both Michelle and I are here representing today. The National Board for Professional Teaching Standards is one of the most respected, longest standing professional certification programs in the country for teachers. So if you think about how, like in the medical profession or in the legal profession, someone has to pass the bar exam or someone has to get kind of that degree of certification. That was the premise that the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards was created under, this idea that in order to help elevate the profession, we wanted to create a certification program that would match the complexity of the work that teachers do in their classrooms all of the time. So, and Michelle's going to be able to share, I think, some more details. But one of the things that I want to say up front about National Board, and as a National Board certified teacher myself, one of the things that's incredibly important to me is that teachers know that even though we're talking about this as a certification program, it truly is a professional growth experience. And so when I went through this experience early in my career, it taught me how to be a better teacher. It taught me how to go from seeing kind of my classroom as a whole to looking at individual students. And really, it taught me how to be reflective and how to ask the kinds of questions that would move individual students from point A to point B and help me understand what my own teaching strategies could do in order to really help facilitate that growth for all of our students. And so I just wanted to offer that framing for National Board, not just as a certification, but really as a professional growth experience. And Michelle, thinking that you can jump in also and add some of your great wisdom.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Lisa. It's so exciting to be here. And absolutely agreeing with Sarah that not only is board certification an amazing professional development, but it becomes a professional lifestyle. We are composed of networks of teachers all across the country who frequently come together virtually these days to really help each other think through problems, to think through problems or challenges the profession may be facing and address them using the standards that were written by teachers for teachers. And what we found, and research has proven time and again, is that the bottom line is students of board certified teachers learn more than students of teachers who are not yet board certified, but also teachers who are mentored by board certified teachers, their students will also learn more. Board certified teachers are retained at a higher rate. And so all of these critical issues in our profession give teachers the opportunity to go through the professional growth and development, get the certification, and then turn those expert teacher skills back to their teaching community and continue to grow themselves while they're giving back. And it's just a real opportunity to be engaged at the highest levels. And some of my very best friends and colleagues are board certified teachers that I've met at conferences or professional developments throughout the country. And sometimes we come together and develop a grant or look at a solution for a problem. And other times we may come together and advocate for a specific policy that could be helpful for teachers, who are seeking board certification. So it's a great chance to break through some of the isolation and aloneness that you can feel. And while you're doing it, you're continuing to maintain your expertise at the highest levels. And, everyone wants a board certified doctor. We feel like everyone should want to be a board certified teacher as well. So really excited to have the conversation as we continue to move forward.
Great, thank you. And now I'd like to turn it over to Cindy.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you, first of all, for the campaign for grade level reading, for allowing me to join you today and discuss this critical topic, because as we know, high quality professional development is needed right now, because literacy is a human right and it's a critical skill for all learning. Structured literacy is in the news like crazy right now, and we know that it is a comprehensive practice that requires extensive training. And it can't be as simple as an add-on to a resource or a curriculum in order to be aligned to what the science says. So true structured literacy practices are really bound to all 8 components of Scarborough's reading rope and delivered in that explicit and prescribed manner. So we know that educators across the country right now are really pressed to focus on literacy instruction as more and more states roll out literacy legislation. So AIM Pathways courses are really detailed and developed for teachers and leaders to understand the importance of that science behind reading instruction, but also the implementation of instructional practices. Because as we know, we can get information from anywhere about reading instruction, but implementation is critical. So I am from AIM Institute. We are a school in Philadelphia, and that school is for students who have language-based learning difficulties. And we are recommended by the National Council of Teacher Qualities in their 4 Pillars to Reading Success Action Guide. We are an IDA accredited coursework. We have those courses that are accredited, and we are currently in partnerships with state departments of education across the country to promote high quality professional learning and reading. Some of AIM's work in departments of education include states like Louisiana, where teachers have to receive science of reading training for teachers in grades K through 3. We also work with Rhode Island Right to Read Act, where we are helping them train teachers in the science of reading by the year 2025. One thing that we are trying to do is help teachers reduce the impact of COVID-related learning loss. And we do that with high quality PD that's completely asynchronous. Our coursework is asynchronous, and we offer pathways for efficient reading. And I took this course first while I was working at the Kansas Department of Education, and it really changed how I viewed professional development. The coursework is engaging, it's high quality, it's relevant. And the important part is any teacher that takes our coursework can walk away with the tools they need to implement this instruction in core tier 1 instruction. So it's that unique niche for teachers that has that included asynchronous learning with synchronous community practice sessions that are held with an AIM certified coach and facilitator. And we do this to help teachers support. In addition to Pathways for Proficient Reading, we offer a plethora of other courseworks. We offer Pathways to Proficient Writing and Pathways to Literacy Leadership. Our writing course is designed for kindergarten through 5th grade teachers, and it's really designed to help those teachers embed daily writing instruction into their structured literacy instructional block. And Pathways to Literacy Leadership is for building leaders and district administrators. And it's developed so that leaders can review reading curriculum, look at instructional plans, and help provide that professional development assistance to their teachers with that lens of structured literacy. We also have asynchronous professional development for teachers who work with students in tiers 2 and 3 of the intervention block, Pathways to Structured Literacy, and the optional practicum course. Once you have completed those 2 courses, you can take the K-PURI exam and become a certified dyslexia interventionist with the credentials from our coursework. We also have coursework that is for families, paraeducators, and for teachers wanting less in-depth professional learning. These are called our first step modules. And our first step modules include coursework on the science of reading, phonological awareness, spelling and decoding, and we have a new course coming out soon on dyslexia awareness. All of our comprehensive courses offer 3 hours of graduate credit from Arcadia University. And AIM Institute is a growing company with a mission to develop and provide professional development with educational excellence. We really want to disseminate evidence-based practices to all educators by providing that access to the latest research through our training. So we would love to connect with you regarding our high quality professional development that can change student outcomes in your school. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Right now, we're going to transition to a discussion between the panelists. And so I have some questions that I'll be asking all of you, or some that are targeted. I want to encourage everyone again to post your questions in the chat, and you will have plenty of opportunity to ask all of our panelists questions. My first question is for National Board. How are you addressing equity issues, especially related to Native American, Latino, and other communities of color?
Sarah, I'll take a first run at this one. The National Board has always been focused on equity. It's been part of the standards that teachers demonstrate evidence to for 30 years. But in recent years, we've really had a renewed and refreshed focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some of the ways that we're going about that are to really examine situations where teachers may not have access to the same information about board certification, and then address those through a variety of projects. For example, we were able to work with the Bureau of Indian Education Schools, and over about 4 or 5 years, we worked with them to go from having fewer than 5 board certified teachers in their school to having more than 100 through a series of professional developments. And we're able to bring that to their reservations so that they weren't having to travel long distances to receive those, to receive that certification. One of the projects that I'm working on right now is the technology integration for Mississippi educators. It's in the Mississippi Delta area primarily focused, and we just were able to grant 300 scholarships to teachers to go through the board certification process and get Apple teacher training, so that there's not going to be this disequity between school districts that can afford to give their teachers that training and school districts that don't have that opportunity. And in that cohort of 300 teachers, more than 81% are teachers of color, and 77% are African-American teachers, which actually exceeds the percentage of teachers of color in Mississippi. So we're really seeing an equity balance and equity shift in that area. And as we continue to go through, we're always looking and learning what barriers are there that may be perceived or real for teachers to go through the certification process, and then how as an organization can we work together with state departments of education, NBCT networks, and other funders to continue to provide this sort of equity. And I will say that it's spectacular that we had 300 positions funded. We had 994 teachers apply for those 300 positions just in Mississippi. So we know there's a real thirst among educators, and particularly among educators of color, to obtain this level of credentialing for their students. And so that's part of the way that we work on our diversity, equity, and inclusion, in addition to consistently having teachers from the field come in and reflect on the standards and make sure that all of our certificate areas, all 25 certificate areas, offer standards that currently address equity and cultural responsiveness and all of these issues in ways that really speak to the students and the teachers in today's world.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. For all of you, I'd like to talk about barriers. So Michelle talked a little bit about some of the barriers that she's experienced, but for you, what are some of the barriers around community perceptions of professional development? How does geographic and financial complications enter into this? And then tell us a little bit about mandated certifications and other areas where you see barriers. Please share.
I think one of the barriers that we have noticed that in the beginning of the pandemic was, just something we hadn't really paid attention to because we are tucked away in our little corner of North Carolina. but just the access to our center and to the trainings. And so we've really worked to try to move into a space where we can provide training in a engaging and effective way, in asynchronous formats. We've traditionally been that face-to-face training, and it took a little bit of learning for us, just as it did for every educator in the country, to figure out how do you still engage and bring the true personal touches that we would normally do in a face-to-face training. So we've really tried to invest the time that we had in this pandemic space to bring trainings and bring those to teachers everywhere. And I think the barrier now, and one of the challenges, becomes, when do teachers then complete those asynchronous trainings? And so I think we have to be thoughtful and creative as we engage with leaders about scheduling trainings. And just as you would have in former years funded for a teacher to go off to training perhaps and be gone for a couple of days, they would have a sub and they'd be away. How will we then create that experience and give that time so that teachers can create those moments for completing asynchronous modules? Because of what I'm hearing too often is, well, they can do that at home, they can do that on their own time when they get home. And that's just, neither is it professional or healthy for the individual experiencing that training. So I think all of us together can begin to be creative now. Like, how do we help leaders be creative in how they schedule those trainings and find those spaces for teachers, honoring their professional time and their needs to, be able to step away and care for their families as well.
Thanks, Sharon. I'd like to bounce off of what you just said there about the asynchronous learning. One of the things that we do at AIM, and I'm sure you do as well at your center, is we really, when we talk to school leaders about laying out a pacing plan for professional learning, we encourage them to do a couple of things. Plan on school day time for teachers to complete this work. Whether you pay a plan period or you add it after school, you take up a staff meeting, you do something where teachers are compensated during the day for their time, because teachers have lives, they have families, and it is, like you said, it's irresponsible if we expect them to do all this exceptional learning on their own time. So that's one barrier that we have addressed as well. Another thing that we are addressing are things such, some states have mandated certifications. I know we're working in one state right now that has required certification for one teacher in each building to be a certified dyslexia, not specialist, but instructor. They have to have the knowledge. And what we're finding is, again, with time, it places that barrier on teachers, because they feel pressure from the state, they feel pressure from their leadership, and we're not honoring teachers, their work, by giving them that time during the day or having time paid off to do this coursework. I would say that some of the geographic barriers that we're facing, Michelle mentioned this, but we're trying to reach some of those native reservations that we have in Arizona, particularly. We have some great resources out there, but they don't have Wi-Fi available, or they don't have those resources that we take for granted. So we're trying to find creative ways to get around those barriers so that we can reach more teachers on a regular basis.
Anyone else want to comment on barriers before we move on?
Lisa, one of the aspects that you had raised in your question was community perception of professional development. And I found that to be such an interesting aspect of the work, in that many times, because our profession doesn't always do a great job of educating our community about what we're doing with professional development and why it's important, there's this perception that, those teacher days are just like a day off, and it doesn't have that great of a perception for a lot of folks. One of the things that we were able to do in the community of Northern Alabama, we actually worked with local businesses and had a meeting with sort of their Chamber of Commerce and talked about, this is what we're teaching teachers. This is the professional development they're going through. And honestly, they got so excited about what they were hearing that their teachers were going to learn about the professional growth and development and the research backing the results with board certification, that they actually founded an initiative called Raise Your Hand. And they have now, in the community of Huntsville, Alabama, raised almost $1 million to fund teachers' time and energy going through professional development towards board certification. And it was such a shift simply by doing what educators do best. We have to educate our community about the need for professional development and why it's so critical for their students that the teachers are constantly able to have that time to grow and learn. So I think one of the things that we need to think about is being very transparent and visible with our inline users, the community.
Well, I appreciate that. And obviously, all of you have thought through some of the geographic challenges, some of the financial challenges with the scholarships. Having asynchronous learning is one way. The only thing we didn't talk about was around mandated certifications. Would anyone like to take that one on?
Happy to talk a little bit about what's happening in our state, because I think we're one of those states that has the new legislation mandating teachers in kindergarten through third grade to receive what I think is an excellent training. It doesn't happen to be a Hill training, but it's an excellent training that's out there. It's a very intense training. And I think what I'm hearing from colleagues in the field is that they're excited about the training. It just happened to come on the heels of a really stressful time in education. And it happened to come in a space where districts were left to kind of create their plans for how they were going to roll the training out for teachers. And not everyone had the creativity or bandwidth to think of the things that we've just talked about in terms of how do we provide that time and space for teachers. It's hard to get subs in our buildings right now, because who wants to come into our buildings and cover for a day? If we send children home, because they've been exposed to COVID, then that inconveniences parents. And if we send them home even more so that we can have professional learning, that's just another challenge. So I've been able to watch a couple of districts in North Carolina come up with some great alternatives. They've used some teacher assistants and paraprofessionals who were willing to step in and cover half days so that teachers could step out of their classrooms and complete those trainings. I think they're fantastic trainings. I do have concerns that sometimes teachers have a negative attitude towards them because of all the circumstances. It's not the training itself, it's just all of the other pieces that surround it. So those creative thinking folks that have made those pieces possible, I think those are the ones that can help us turn the tide in some places where it may not have been as well received.
Great, thank you, Sharon. The next question I have is for each of you again, and that is, who specifically is your professional development for? So please identify for us your target population.
I can start. AIM Pathways is for families, for paraeducators, for teachers. Our 3-hour graduate level courses, our full complete courses, are for teachers pre-K through 12th grade. Every teacher touches a student with reading one way or another, even if they're high school calculus teachers. So we think our basic course will reach all teachers. We have coursework as well for interventionist level teachers who teach at that tier 2 and tier 3. Those specialists, we have that coursework, and we have coursework for principals as well.
Can jump in. National board targets classroom teachers. So they're targeting, it's a target to classroom teachers. Like Michelle mentioned, we have over 25 certification areas, which really allows teachers to drill down that professional learning to a content area or to a grade level that they are working with day in and day out. And I do think that there is something really important about that intersection between the professional development or the professional learning that teachers are receiving and those certification areas, because it's within the context of what's happening in their classroom all of the time. We also most recently have really worked on gathering some energy around using this for very early career teachers as well. And so this is also really exciting as we think about, again, not just how this is a certification program, but how this is a pathway for teachers to, to grow, and especially our young teachers new to the profession, making sure that they have a community in which they feel will see them through an entire career, not just through a single experience.
We have a wide variety of clients and colleagues in the professional space. Our Science of Reading course is an intro course, so it's definitely for people who want just a taste of understanding what the science of reading is. It's good for an administrator or a teacher that's just getting started. We also have partnered with a couple of IHEs. We worked with Duke University this year and with UNC Greensboro, University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and brought that course in for them to have their pre-service teachers experience a little bit of the science of reading as one of the introductions to their work. We have our intervention program, Hill Reading Achievement Program, is for a tier 2 or tier 3 teacher looking for intensive reading intervention. Our online courses are open for teachers, paraprofessionals, tutors. We have a lot of tutors who use our program, and some homeschool parents. And then we do have a whole series of community education programs that are free to anyone who wants to log on with us once a month to hear from a variety of professionals. Many of those work in the executive function ADHD space, and it does provide, it's targeted to families. So if you're working with families who have students and children with those needs, then they can log on and listen to the professionals talk about different ways to work with your children.
Great, thank you. My next question is, how does your professional development address developmentally appropriate instruction, especially preschool through 3rd grade?
Well, I guess I could talk about that one too. Hill Rap is targeted at kindergarten through 6th grade reading level. Because we are a structured literacy program and we do work with the International Multisensory Language Institute, we really work into that space of multisensory instruction. It is kind of one of the cornerstones of what we do. And so we encourage teachers and throughout trainings, and that really throughout the coaching pieces afterwards, not just the training, it's the follow-up coaching that really makes a difference for teachers. So throughout that follow-up, we emphasize the need to bring in multisensory opportunities, sand trays and manipulatives, counters, things that are just naturally engaging to students, but really essential for some students to be able to make the language and literacy connection.
I can add a bit from our perspective. Oh, sorry. With board certification, we do have several certificate areas that specialize in those early years, literacy, reading, and language arts. My certificate, exceptional needs, goes from birth to age 21. We have early childhood generalists. But with each of those, what we found is that the connection between board certification and success in literacy is becoming clearer and clearer. And when Mississippi implemented their 3rd grade reading gate law, the governor came to the national board and asked if we could come in and help with an intervention for the students who were not successful with the reading gate and see what we could do to support them. And then also to double the number of teachers in Mississippi who are board certified in the area of literacy, reading, and language arts to really boost those skills so that more students would be passing the reading gate and fewer would be, looking at retention or other interventions. And so we worked with teachers across the state. We provided opportunities for students who needed additional support to come in and get that tutoring in sessions with board certified teachers using the same curriculum. And we found that 85% of those students went on to pass the reading gate. And then beyond that, the teachers who came in and observed the board certified teacher, 90% of them reported gaining additional skills by watching that board certified teacher interacting with students and having that professional learning later. The state actually went back and did a follow-up evaluation, and all other factors being equal, teachers' years of experience, student poverty levels, they determined that the students, kindergarten students with a board certified teacher were 31% more likely to read a grade level at the end of the year. That is an enormous progress, particularly for students who may be coming into kindergarten without the skill set. And so the state has continued to invest in having board certified teachers focusing on those literacy skills in those early years, and they see that there's a carryover rate. The scores have continued to improve in Mississippi in terms of the literacy, and the numbers of board certified teachers continue to grow as they also see that success among their students. And so when we look at making that connection, both clear to the teachers as they see it in their standards and in their day-to-day work, and then also making the connection again for other stakeholders so that they see the importance of having that expertise, that incredible, strong professional development from the very beginning so that our youngest learners are prepared for success all the way through. It just makes for a wonderful partnership for success.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond?
Thank you. Yes, I will just add that our developmentally appropriate practices are embedded in our coursework. We really focus on oral language development. As you know, that birth to age 5 is critical for oral language development, which ties into literacy proficiency. So we really work with teachers in our coursework to understand that oral language isn't just for little kids. It goes all the way up through high school. We can embed those 5 strands of language into oral language activities, no matter what we teach, but we really specifically look at that developmentally appropriate practice at pre-KK 1 and 2. Our coursework, Pathways for Proficient Reading, really takes a deep dive into oral language. We have a whole section of our course on oral language and activities to do in the classroom to improve oral language outcomes for students. We also have the lens of students who have dialect or who are non-English native English speakers. So we have Dr. Julie Washington and Dr. Elsa Cardenas Hadicke on our coursework to show teachers how to work with students from diverse populations, especially at younger ages, to show that even what a child brings to you from their dialect or their home background may sound different than the academic language of your classroom, but it's still proper, correct language in their lens. So we work with teachers to recognize what that looks like.
Great, thank you all. And Cindy, you actually were a perfect bridge to this next question, which is actually my favorite question of all of these. How do we ensure that community and family are embedded into professional development?
I'm happy to start again. I was trying to give someone else the opportunity to go. I didn't want to hog the time, but one of the things that I just want to make the case that AIM Institute was founded by two mothers who had children who couldn't read or read and learned differently. It was founded because that need for family communication was so important. So our coursework is founded in the lens of how children learn to read and how to communicate that to parents. We have to have teachers who understand how to read a universal screener and how to give an informal diagnostic and communicate those results to a parent. Just because you give a child a dyslexia screener does not mean the child has dyslexia. And we need to be able to have those comfortable conversations with our families. And we embed that in our coaching sessions. That's how we communicate that implementation piece through our coaching sessions.
And I just wanted to jump in and speak to really the first tenet that we teach everyone who goes through national board certification is that you have to know your students. And so to teach your students, you have to know them. And that means knowing I like to think of it as their two stories, right? You need to know how they learn, what motivates them, but you also need to know the story of their community, of their family, of their home. And what one of the things that's really important in going through the national board process is that teachers learn how to embrace community as part of their students' academic growth. They learn how to embrace family as part of student academic growth. And so when a teacher goes through certification and they're collecting artifacts and they're generating their analysis of their instruction, this is a central question that is asked of them, right? And so, and this is, I think, also a really wonderful example of how this is more than certification. Because if you're not already doing this, this is a framework for how to do it. And I think that's just incredibly important. And it's not in the abstract. I think that's another thing that's really important to bring into this conversation that's part of National Board when it comes to community and family, is that it's not going to listen to someone talk about how important community and family involvement is and being like, rah, rah, yes, I believe that. This is, you have to show it, right? You have to engage in order to complete that certification. And so it's taking it from the abstract and it's putting it into action. And I think that action is so central to making sure that we are doing the work, right? We're not just talking about the work, but we're doing the work.
I think that doing the work, I think, is just, we're in it, right? We have to be it has to be a part of the essence and the ethos of what we do every day, and connecting with our children and our families. Building off of what Cindy said, we've added into our Hill Wrap trainings, because it's the one that we have the most people go through. We worked with Dr. Lakeisha Johnson at Florida State for understanding dialectism and what is the impact on reading instruction, and how do we approach that as educators, so that every teacher who comes to a Hill training now has a module that she's built, so that it's the first thing that they understand, that we recognize and get to know the children, their culture, what do they bring to the table, how does that influence our teaching, and then we can start to begin to unpack that. Now, in our little module, there's no way that we can make anyone a master or expert at that, because that's a massive field and such important work. But our hope is that we can expose enough people to that they can then seek out more training and there's an awareness that we have to build so that we can then impact further. So we've added that, and that's an exciting part of what we'll roll out this summer.
Great, thank you all so much. My next question is, in what ways do these certifications that you offer position the student experience as central to the implementation?
I don't know if it was Sarah or Michelle that said it, but one of you said the most beautiful thing. I had to write it down because you said everyone wants a board certified doctor. And I think as a parent of a child with dyslexia, I want a dyslexia certified teacher that knows how to impact what my daughter needs. And I have watched the difference that it has made. My daughter was in a traditional, education setting that she didn't have access to that for 5 years. I was on the other side just going, oh no, what has happened? What do I do? How do I fix this? Then I had the good fortune, that Hill came into my life and I was able to take her with me every day. And in 1 year to watch the difference, and that now I have a confident learner who just wrote earlier today the most beautiful note to her teachers that said, thank you for giving me the life skills that I need so I can open the bakery that I always dreamed of. Like, that kind of response is what every child in the country deserves, regardless of what they bring to the table. So the certifications that we offer are not about the piece of paper. It's about the process of going through and thinking about what each child needs, and how you coach and how we mentor and how we work together as a profession to make these children have the best experience possible, so that all kids can have that kind of experience.
Well, that was a drop mic. Thank you, Sharon. I mean, it makes you teary-eyed when it comes home to your own children as well. That makes such a difference. Would anyone else like to share on that question before we move on?
One of the things that Sarah had mentioned are 5 core propositions, and we have a little booklet that you can download what teachers should know and be able to do. And so much of that talks about that student and that student's family and how you can connect, meet the student where they're at, and really use your knowledge of students married with your knowledge of content and pedagogy to create a completely different experience. And we have a resource, the Atlas Video Case Library, that is actually videos that teachers have submitted during their certification process, along with their reflective analysis. And this is now being used in multiple teacher preparation institutions, as well as among school districts. And one of the things that people find so fascinating is these are not perfect lessons with perfect students. It's real life. It's what's really happening in the classroom. And it gives both teachers in training and the other teachers who are engaging in professional development that opportunity to see that these students are just like their students, and these are students who may not always be on task or who might have a misperception, and to watch the way that as a profession we meet that student and help them to morph into a learner who's confident and conscious of where they want to take their learning. And it's a great resource, and I think that it brings home and makes very visual the invisible in our teaching craft. And so much of what we do are these rapid internal decisions where we're using that knowledge of students in ways that an outsider is just going to think, oh, you just decided to have those kids go into a small group and you were going to work with this group. And in reality, as professionals, we know how much went into that decision. And with Atlas, it kind of spells it out for you while you're seeing the decisions go on. And so I think that that student-centeredness, that opportunity for teachers to share that expertise with each other is one of the most amazing developments in our profession recently. And that as we bring more and more people into the profession who may be coming from a different background, who may not have the traditional teaching experience, it's so important that we give them that opportunity to embrace that knowledge of students as a critical part of the craft. It's not a crime to spend some time off curriculum talking to your students to get to know them and how they can best be a learner.
Lisa, if it's okay, I would like to just chime in before we have to transition. I really, the women on this call today are just, it's amazing to be part of this conversation. And what I want to say is that one of the things that we focus with student-centered work is that, isn't it a shame that students who have the greatest need have to leave the classroom to get what they need? And we want this information in every single teacher's hands. And that's how we have designed our courses, to ensure that all teachers have this information and know how to act upon it. We even have recorded videos from classroom simulations from our own school with our own teachers and our own students, again, not staged, in our coursework, so people can see that this is a real thing and that we have to embrace the way our students learn in order to reach all of them.
Great, thank you. I'm so glad that you all were able to share on that last question because you added such depth to it. Thank you. My next question has to do with teachers' time, and that was mentioned already. It's valuable, and expectations still exist for them to volunteer for additional credentialing. And what opportunities exist to professionalize continued education and certifications, offer asynchronous learning, which you talked about earlier, and also compensate educators for this training?
I'll unleash my little policy nerd side. This is where, as a profession, we really need to borrow some of the professional psychology of other professions. I was an attorney before I was a teacher, and attorneys never apologize for being paid and being paid well. With teachers, there's this sort of perception that it's a calling, and so you really should be ashamed of getting paid well. And that's just simply not the case. And as educators, when we work together with policymakers and with community members, we can actually demonstrate the value add that we bring with these credentials, with these certifications, with these additional courses. And in many cases, we can then get policy developed that pays for that additional knowledge. Board certification, teachers receive additional pay in the form of stipends or pay increases in about 26 states. And these are sometimes incredibly significant. Here in Mississippi, it's a $6,000 pay raise to be board certified. And in 16 critical needs counties, it's an additional $4,000. So a $10,000 pay raise for obtaining and maintaining your board certification. The state of Maryland, after an extensive study led by the Cohen Commission, recently reformed their entire teacher compensation system, and teachers are expected to be paid for their additional credentialing. And not only do they get a significant pay raise for obtaining board certification, each time they maintain that certification every 5 years, they get another pay raise, because the state recognized after all the research that each time you maintain that certificate, you're going through a more in-depth look and you're offering more expertise. And so I think that when we as a profession are very explicit about the benefits that we bring to our classroom for these trainings, the fact that it's not necessarily a move up into administration, it's a move into your profession and into your pedagogy that merits a pay increase. And as advocates, when we can tell our stories to policymakers, when we can invite them into the classroom to see what's actually occurring, that's when we can make those policy strides that will fund both the work that we need with our students and then the teachers who are, impossible to do that work without, and do it in such ways that, a teacher doesn't have to work a second job in order to maintain a decent lifestyle for their family. Board certification put one of my daughters through college and put braces on the other one. So it was nice to stop waitressing and spend my time focusing on my craft and my profession, as I was continuing to go through the process. I'll put my soapbox away for the moment about teachers and their need for better pay.
Would anyone else like to add to Michelle's soapbox? She did such an incredible job. I could get on that one as well. All right, I think you did such a great job. We're going to move on. I just have 2 more questions, and then we're going to get into the audience Q&A. Very excited about that. The next question is, what positive experiences or outcomes have you seen in the course of your work with PD? So some of those things you've said. So what, again, positive experiences or outcomes have you seen in the course of your work with professional development?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is being in the seat that I'm in now. I don't always get to see the outcome because I'm working with people at the district level. And every once in a while, I think it's such a gift when a teacher will reach out and share some nuggets and some stories. But, not long ago, I got a picture of one of our teachers out in Davie County, and she had a picture of herself and her 4 students in Hill Rack. We always teach with only 4 students, no more. And they were all holding cupcakes because they were just so excited that they had mastered their benchmarks in literacy for their screeners, and they were feeling success. And I was looking at those children and just thinking like that's why we do this. And it's those stories and it's the excitement, and those were young children, and knowing that we can impact young children so that they can then be successful and not have to struggle through elementary school. We can impact so much earlier if we just do the right things for them in the first place. Like I looked at those 4 faces and thought, yeah, if I don't do anything else, at least I helped one teacher with these students be able to find a space where they view themselves as learners for an entire career and not waiting until they're in middle school and they finally start to feel successful. So, I think that's the stories are powerful and great when you get them.
Sharon. I also agree with stories. We just finished a course today, and someone shared with me that the teacher replied that it's been such a rough year in the classroom this year that they almost had to drag themselves to school some days, but they said the coursework they took was the only bright spot in their year. And I don't highlight that for our coursework, but I highlight that to say, when we know better, we do better. And if we can have an army or a corps of teachers who know better, just think of the good we can do.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Michelle has done such a wonderful job of sharing a lot of really, I think, impressive kind of quantitative data about the impact of national board certification in a lot of different spaces. And I think that's really, really important. I also just want to come back around to the importance of teachers having community. And the necessity of teachers to have a professional space in which it is okay to be imperfect, in which it is okay to be vulnerable, in which it is okay to ask questions of others and say, how would you handle this? Help me think through this. And so I think one of the success stories of National Board is the really robust communities of teachers that are created as they go through this process together. And it creates friendships, it creates collegial relationships. And I think it just also reiterates that we cannot do this work unless we are willing to be imperfect. And so being able to have that soft space to land, right, is incredibly important for our students, right? And so I think that's another thing that that the National Board experience offers the people who go through it.
Great, thank you. And Sarah, you were a perfect bridge to the next question. And you talked about this earlier when we started the conversation, but what has your personal experience with professional development been, and what long-term benefits have you seen in your own work?
I think I would like to take that one because the National Board experience for me as a teacher has impacted everything about how I now build PD for other teachers, because it helped me understand the thought processes that I think one of you said that they're invisible. And that's the most challenging thing for teachers, is to understand the questioning and the responses that have to happen internally. And it looks like it's just flawless, right? But I think the longer I taught, the more notes I took, the more planning that I did, because I realized that there are so many decisions that have to be made. I know for a fact that I did not do that. I did not think like that as an educator prior to going through the National Board process. So that idea of building a reflective teacher has now started to infiltrate the way that I build PD. Is what do I do to help teachers think about their thinking and think about their questioning, and helping them prepare to make good decisions regardless of what piece of material gets put in front of them. How do they then interact and think through it carefully? So thank you, National Board.
I would just like to wrap up this part of the questioning with just echoing what everyone has said. National Board certification is like the epitome of where teachers want to be. But I will say that AIM Pathway coursework is modeled in Learn, Practice, Apply framework. We learn, then we practice, and then we apply it. And one of the things through professional development that I've been through that has been either poor quality or high quality, poor quality professional development is being talked at for hours and hours and hours without application. And the unique thing about coursework that we offer is that the application piece is critical to what we do. So reflecting on poor professional development, we are always seeking ways, and we work with researchers, renowned reading researchers across the world and across the country, to ensure that it is high quality, evidence-based, and the research is current. We're not working off of old research, because as we all know here on this call, reading research is evolving and changing at all time, and we have to rely on that research in order to move forward. So our professional development, for me, has to be relevant, and it has to be engaging with the application piece. We don't want to set through PD that is set and get or one and done. It has to be one of those reoccurring themes for it to be relevant.
Yeah, I think to build on what Cindy is talking about, as a teacher who's gone through professional development, for a couple of decades, as someone who does a lot of professional development around the country, one of the things that I think one of the messages we accidentally give teachers is that the answer to better instruction and teaching is somehow outside of them. Like it's in a thing. It's in a module, it's on a piece of paper. And I think that sometimes that happens because of pressures within systems, right? So, but the truth is that it's inside of them. It is not outside of them. It is inside of them. It is inside our ability to do what Sharon was talking about: ask the questions, seek the answers, be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Those are the things that ultimately change practice. And so when we think about professional learning for teachers, we have to think about it in the same way we think about growth for our students. We have to think about that whole person, right? That whole human. And we can't undermine ourselves by making it any less complex than it actually is. And so one of my pet peeves is when, I'm in a professional development and somebody says to me, you're already doing this. This is going to be so easy, right? Well, then why are we doing it? Like, this is hard, complex work that teachers are doing every day. So let's talk about the hard, complex work. And let's not say that it's going to be easy, but let's not say you're going to have to do it alone. Right? Let's not say you're going to get one piece of information and then somehow be held accountable to it, 2 months from now. Let's walk beside our teachers as we commit to their professional growth right along with their students.
Well said, Sarah.
Yes, I agree. Thank you all. So now we're going to turn to audience questions. And I just wanted to remind everyone out there again to post your questions in the Q&A box if you haven't already. And I will get started with that. I also wanted to let you know that we will be posting in the chat box a survey or evaluation, and that will be up there probably at 25 after. So we're at 6 after. We're doing great on time. The first question for the panelists: how can schools, districts, and states, and I need to know that, ensure that we are making good, smart, worthwhile choices when it comes to professional development options?
I think you have to look at the research. I think you have to look at the evidence. What evidence does this company or this product or this way of teaching have that is proved in science and in clinical research? How are we connecting what we're learning about how the brain learns to read for reading instruction, what the professional development is reflected? State departments, unfortunately, are tied to state legislation. And as we know, sometimes state legislation doesn't always align to best practice. So we want to make sure that if we have a mandated professional development, that we're looking into finding or someone to fulfill that mandate that has the evidence and the science and the knowledge behind it, that looks at the whole child and doesn't just look at, I'm checking a box to get this requirement met.
I also think it's really important to be sure that there's teacher voice and student voice in those conversations and in those inquiries. I think the conversation is the learning, right? When it comes right down to it, the conversation is the learning. And if we want teachers to be invested in their learning, we have to have a conversation with them about what they believe and what they think and what they see the needs are. And I think it's also true for our students. I think we have to embed those conversations with teachers and students into our plans. Because without that, I think we're missing something that's really, really valuable. And it's really hard. Otherwise, it's really hard to not be compliant if you haven't asked folks, right? So if you haven't asked teachers where they're at, what their needs are, if you haven't asked students where they are at, what their needs are, like the option is compliance. So if we want engagement, then we have to engage them at the beginning and not tell them this is what you should be learning, but bring it out of them.
And I think there's such a desire by so many well-intentioned folks who are leading the work in various states to have a consistency so that teachers are getting the same kind of information, which I think is absolutely essential. But at the same time, there are places that have found success and have a fantastic program that they're already engaged in. So I think it's a mistake to mandate something that undoes another program or another body of work or another piece that's been effective when you try to get everybody on the same thing. So I think being flexible and thoughtful and creating guidelines and looking at the evidence to see if the variety of things that could meet that work can all be honored is the right way to go to be able to meet the needs of all districts. And I think about North Carolina, I think about other states and the diversity that you see from the coast to the mountains in our state and from every other state, I'm sure. The needs of various teachers, depending on their location and where they may have gone to university, and if there's a high concentration of a certain university in certain places, then the needs of those districts can be quite different. So to try to mandate something that's right for everyone is kind of the same like poor teaching practice of mandating the same curriculum for every child, So I think really thinking about the diversity and the diverse needs of teachers is an important part of that conversation as well.
One last thing I'd like to add, Lisa, if I could.
Of course.
I think that it's incumbent on us as professionals to really fight the infantilization of teachers. In other professions, there may be regulatory matters for your licensure around that you need X amount of professional development, but they don't come in and tell you exactly what to study or exactly what you need to do. And as educators, when we connect with decision makers, give them clear conversation and research-based outcomes about what our practice is doing and where we're going with that, when we actually advocate for our profession and introduce ourselves as board certified teachers, as flash those credentials and let them know what they mean, we gain that trust as professionals that even though they're investing state dollars, they don't have that need to continually poke at what we're teaching and what we're learning. And when you look at public health services, it would be shocking to see a public health service official being told, well, you need to come back and practice suturing, even though you've been doing it for 20 years, or you need to work on this. It's that we need to continue to push that professional trust and let them know that we are capable of knowing what it is that we need. And when we're allowed, as Sarah mentioned, to come together in community and converse with each other as professionals, that's when we truly grow by leaps and bounds. And so, whenever we have that opportunity to advocate on specific issues or for the profession at large, it's just critical that we engage in that, whether that advocacy is inviting a policymaker into your classroom or writing an informed, letter about a particular piece of legislation that's coming along. It's a fabulous way for us to really grow our learning community in very, very positive ways.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm glad that you got in there at the last second. Appreciate it. The next question has to do with parents and caregivers. And so our audience would like to know what outreach programs or trainings you have and provide to, again, parents and caregivers. And I would also say, if you have anything specific, if you could also put the link in the chat for our audience, that would be great. Who would like to answer that question?
We have not rolled our schedule out for the fall yet, but it should be coming soon. And probably by the time Hattie sends out links, I would be able to provide that. But we do have a monthly offering for parents and families. So we focus a lot of our time on executive function skills, helping students really organize their study skills for taking tests, transitioning into college or university from a high school environment, and the needs of executive function students in that space. So we have a lot of those programs that are up and coming. They do happen on a monthly basis, and you can watch them, stream them online. And I will provide that link for you as soon as I have all the dates. And we encourage everybody to participate in that.
Thank you. Going to move on to, do you think that your models have helped mitigate against teacher burnout?
Well, that's a great question. And if anyone has a solution to that, I'm all ears. This has been such a trying year for professionals in the teaching profession, administrators, and we're calling it the Great Resignation. There's so many people leaving right now. And I think that until we have district leaders and building leaders who understand that the onus is not on the teacher for professional learning, it is on the district. They need to make frameworks, create frameworks where professional learning can happen during the school day, where teachers are valued for taking time off for professional learning and not it's not a punitive, I have to leave my class, I have to make some plans, I have to be gone for 2 days or whatever. Our coursework, again, is asynchronous, and due to the asynchronous nature, we encourage leaders to think about that framework when they're implementing the synchronous sessions. Now, just because I have an asynchronous coursework doesn't mean that I need to do that coursework when I have kids in my classroom. My leaders need to help support me in how that coursework is going to get done. And the district needs to frame an hour a week for that, 2 hours a week for that, whatever it looks like in your particular district. And we really encourage school leaders to use that lens when scheduling any type of professional learning that is asynchronous, because that is a heavy lift for teachers, especially right now with COVID learning going on.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. Thank you for that, Cindy. What are some models for getting this training done in regards to time commitments beyond financial compensation?
We have a couple of districts that we work with that provide an extra hour of release time within the school day. So they do it in creative ways, like they give double specials. So the children may have a double PE or a double art. We work a lot in elementary schools. There may be elective times. So those kinds of things in creative scheduling don't have as much financial impact, but they do allow for that release time for teachers to be able to complete those professional learning activities. And I think that's a conversation I think I'd love to hear some other ideas of how people have navigated that space.
One of the models that we've seen is when a district has a large cohort or groups of teachers going through board certification, they'll often give professional release days. And they'll also give those not just to the teachers who are going through the cohort, but to the mentors who are engaging in that work as well. So, you don't have that issue of, well, I'm available for PD, but the person I'm, to be working from and learning from is not, because they're also in their classroom. So to make that available. And in addition, I don't think it's worth necessarily passing over the compensation issue. It doesn't solve all the problems, but we find that when teachers are given compensation for the time that they invest in a certification, for the time that they engage in that process, it really does make it much easier for them to continue forward. And, with a lot of the initiatives that we've done make certain that if a teacher engages in a certain number of professional developments leading up to one of the national board components, they might receive a stipend equivalent to the cost of that particular component of board certification. And I think working in concert with the superintendents and building level principals allows you to help stretch both the resources financially in ways that make sense for both the administration and for the teacher, and then also to use that creativity to have scheduling so that you're working with groups of teachers in ways that are really meaningful. Where there's a will, there's a way is a trite expression, but it is actually true that when an administration values the professional development their teachers are going through, they will find a way to make it fit into the school day.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions. One is, what can you say about the power of teacher-parent relationships, and how do you support that with your certifications?
One of the things that we ask our candidates that are going through a practicum to do is a case study. And in order to build that case study, you have to really get to know the student and the family. And the intention of that, I'm sure you all have a case study as well. It's a requirement for most IDA and MFLC certifications. But to communicate with those parents is an important skill. And that is a safe place that we can guide teachers through. How do you then talk to parents who need to understand where their students are, how they're progressing in their skill development? So the case study process for us is one way that we can do that, and then support and guide a teacher through those kinds of conversations. So there's a skill and an art to being able to talk to parents about very difficult things, particularly with the students that we work with, very sensitive topics and difficult things to navigate sometimes that come with a lot of emotion. So case studies are a great opportunity for us to do that kind of work.
I think it speaks volumes that every certificate area for board certification has a standard that specifically addresses that family communication, caregiver communication, and it's a requirement that you're able to document not just communication, but meaningful two-way dialogue, so that I can send home all the flyers I want and not help my parents work with their students, but that two-way communication that you document as part of the certification process not only enhances the ongoing practice, but it really, I think, is a statement to the profession that, this is not optional. This is how you really further your work as an educator, by communicating with families and caregivers across the board on issues large and small.
Thank you. And again, I heard earlier that getting to know the student and their family and their community is just an important part of ensuring that students are receiving the highest quality learning experiences possible. The last question that I have from the audience, and it's perfect timing: if participants want to disseminate and advocate for the offerings that you've talked about, how can they best do that?
So if you would like to know more about Hill or share any of that information, we do have a Hill catalog, and then you can also, there's an email in there that you can reach out to me. Most of what we do is custom, and so we would work with you to build a professional plan that best suits the needs of your district or school or state. In some cases, we have a couple of state projects that we work on, but I would be the person that you would talk to, and the email should be in that catalog link that will be provided to you.
And if you want any information regarding AIM coursework, please reach out to any of the links that were posted when I spoke earlier. We have a consulting team that will be happy to help you with district cohorts, school cohorts, and as Sharon mentioned, we also have statewide initiatives going on. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to get information to you.
Great, thank you all. I appreciate that. So I wanted to remind you that there is a survey poll And we want to make sure that you provide your feedback before you log off. And we're very excited to have had our panel. Thank you so much. I learned a lot myself. My background has been in early education. And so I think a lot about teacher preparation from the perspective of birth to 5. And then that transition piece into kindergarten is critical. I've been fortunate to be a part of the Grade Level Reading Campaign and thinking about birth to 3rd grade for many years, and appreciated so much being the facilitator today. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Hattie. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you to everybody, to all of our panelists for speaking today and sharing what their organizations are doing. It's been very inspiring, and I hope that everyone who joined us today came away with some new resources and some inspiration. And I will be sharing everything that we posted in the chat in the follow-up material, so keep your eye out for all of that. And just as a last reminder, I wanted to make sure everybody takes a look at the upcoming webinars that we have on the schedule, which you can see on the PowerPoint slide right here. Thanks again to everybody and to Lisa for moderating. It's been a really wonderful conversation. And I look forward to seeing many of you at a future Learning Tuesday webinar with the campaign. Thank you so much.